Welcome. And so I'm jumping on the call because my younger and more handsome colleague Alex suffered a power outage about 15 minutes ago or half an hour ago, and asked me to cover this session for him. We've talked about the content, so my best to fill in. I don't have a formal presentation, but I'll tell you what I think the basics are, and then you can push back on me. Lauren, do we want to take questions during my section or hold everything until both presentations have been?
I guess as they come up, if people have questions, but if there's, need more discussion than afterwards.
Okay, just a question of time management, but all right, so let's start with membership. And maybe we should just talk about back and forth about your programs and your goals. But I would always start any conversation about membership with the question of why are you doing that? And I'll offer a few ideas, but then I'd like to hear what you're thinking. Membership is really a way to formalize and structure relationships with your constituents. So, as you know, your constituents can be volunteers, they can be advocates, they can be donors, they may be.
You got it?
Yeah. Okay. Right. So those are three biggies. What else? Sometimes legislative advocates. What is it you need? And what is the primary purpose of membership? A lot of organizations have individual donor programs, and then they feel like they're missing out because they don't have a membership program on top of it. I would say make sure the donor program is really operating at maximum efficiency before complicating it with the membership. If that's your primary goal, go that way. On the other hand, sometimes, and particularly for environmental advocates, having numbers is a very important indicator, both symbolically and practically. If you've got hundreds of people who can call a legislator or governor and influence policy, that's obviously a huge gain and a huge asset to have on tap if you can create that. So those are some of the first starting questions. If you say that your goal is money or advocacy, then start doing the math. How many do we need at what price? And then back from that, how much work do I need to do to recruit 100 members or 1,000 members or whatever? And I think if you look at a successful membership or even donation relationship as a transaction, then there's a cost to that transaction in terms of the time and investment you make in making that happen. And there's probably a number of unsuccessful requests between you and the first yes, right? So you have to consider that it's probably the work of going out to 5,000 people to get 1,000 donors, or even much higher. So those are some starting points. Do you have any questions about why, or comments about why? How many of you have membership programs? I'm sorry, I'm not getting a gallery. I have to scroll through to see. Okay, so some do, some don't. I mean, I looked at a couple of websites and I saw just regular donor program, one good basic membership program at Pinelands Conservation. So, so what are some of the reasons that you do have membership? Those of you who have those programs.
Advocacy.
Okay, and what's your organization?
Sourland Conservancy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sourland Conservancy.
Okay, and so how long have you had your program, your membership program?
Well, We've been saving the Sourlands for 30 years, but and they did have a small membership program from the start, but we didn't really get serious about trying to recruit members until probably 2014.
So a good long time. And how valuable are your members as advocates, as backup to your mission?
So it's kind of a funny thing where we ask folks to, contact their legislators, and we get a variety of responses from members as well as from the general public. So it seems like, especially as time goes on, more people are advocating and less people are joining because of that. So they can still advocate even if they're not members, but we do like to try to get some good solid membership numbers so we can stand up and say, I'm here representing 1,600 residents of the Sourlands.
And how do you define a member? Who's a member?
So our members are donors, and we're looking at that, and that's part of the reason why I'm listening to this, is because I feel like we have a great volunteer base, and we also have, as I said, people who advocate without donating. And I'm not sure that it's really necessary that people donate in order to be considered a member. I think I don't know where to draw the line there, but I think it's obviously we need the funds, but we also really need people to contact their legislators and, and their municipalities and say, that the forest is important to us.
So every donor is a member?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's the way an organization that I did a lot of membership work for over many years did it. Was every donor was a member. They could opt out, but it never happened as far as I know. And it didn't mean more than that we could say they were a member, that we could speak to them as members of the family. It meant that, we could imply and perhaps create through some of our language a little closer affiliation. Now, there also should be other delivery of benefit and community building rather than just, hey, member, it's great that you're a member. Can you send us a little more money, or can you renew your membership, or what have you?
We do have the very best holiday party ever.
That's
I'm
cool.
just saying. Yeah,
And just for members, or?
it is for members.
Yeah. So that's something. Having an exclusive benefit is nice. I think in our earlier conversation, but I'll repeat it. We say, don't get all hung up on stuff. A tiered membership where, the first thing you get to come to, you get the newsletter. Okay. Then you feel like, well, for $100, you got to get a newsletter and something else and something else, and then something else on top of that to get to 500 or 1,000. That can get pretty complicated. It can get hard to fulfill all those items. And those items probably don't have a great deal of value to the donor. It also defines their contribution in a transactional quid pro quo manner. And I think really what you want to do is to engage them in your mission and make them want to do $1,000 worth of good or $50 worth of good through your organization. And as a thank you, perhaps get some stuff, but not as a exchange of value, because it's not really, you're not nearly compensating them for their dollars. So once you've set some goals, I think it's important to understand your membership.
Wait, could I add something?
Oh, please.
Yeah, I'm super interested in this conversation. I'm Cindy from the Musknetcong Watershed Association, and we are actually a legal membership organization. It is in our bylaws that we will have members. And my board, and yet, we also face the problem of how do you distinguish a member from a donor? We do not have the staff capacity to manage rolling memberships. we have sort of this artificial, as you were just saying, oh, $50 you're a supporter and $100 you're silver and $250 you're gold. And I mean, it means nothing because we don't provide any, you know, very minor, like, oh, you can come on a hike for free instead of paying $3. I mean, we've tried to like come up with some, you know, benefit, but it applies to all members. And it's just become a nightmare. You know, they think there are people who think they're members because we put out a letter every year in the beginning of the year, and then they write membership on their check. And yet anyone who gives us money, we're adding to the mailing list. They're going to get the newsletter. They're going to be invited to every event. You know, everyone who gives us money is someone we want to, you know, consider as a member and a part of our family. But it adds this level of confusion. Like, do we, you know, what if you start now, you know, someone gives you a donation and then you include them in the membership renewal mailing, and they're like, I didn't join your organization. I'm not a member. I don't owe you another, you know, it's just, but we have some board members who think it's very important to maintain this. It is in our bylaws. It would require a change of our bylaws. Their one, not benefit, but the one, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Criterion.
They vote at our annual meeting to approve new board members. So and again, the bylaws say we're supposed to have a list of who's, you know, who's a current member. Well, members can send us checks all through the year. So if they send their check in November, they think they're a member and they should be on the list. But if we look at it as, you know, we can't do rolling memberships, you know, if you haven't given this year, you're not a member, maybe you shouldn't be on the list to vote. So we don't even know who should be on the list or not on the list. I mean, I am like so done with this.
Oh, man.
Or I need to figure out, is there a reason to maintain membership? What's the benefit, the value, and then, you know, how do you make it manageable? You know, when we don't have full-time development staff who can be, you know, it's November, time for you to renew. You know, you gave us last year on November 18th. Well, you know, too bad. In February, they're getting a letter asking them to renew their membership.
Right.
They might wait till November. Well, if they wait till November, you're not a voting member at the annual meeting this year. So, which, you know, we haven't even dealt with. We just
When's your annual meeting?
It's usually in March, and the way we've dealt with it is just to take a voice vote. You know, we don't do what we're supposed to do, which is sign them in and make sure they're on the list as a member.
Yeah, I think you should probably look at your bylaws and see if you can relieve some of your burden that way. Just simplify it. You know, I think in terms of donations, the holy grail now is sustainer giving. You know, we're subscribed to everything. So try to get them to subscribe to you, whether you call them members or not. But membership might be a way for you to distinguish those folks and then ensure that they're paid up at the annual meeting because they've been giving all year. That might be a way to distinguish members from other contributors. Just off the top of my head. I mean, in practical terms, in terms of function, there's not really a serious difference. But when you have voting membership, that can become an issue. If there's a controversy, then those members have the power to boot the board or force other kinds of changes. So that can get to be a hassle, embarrassing, and a distraction. So I would say, you know, if the less tied down you are by bylaws in terms of these technical things, the better. Does the bylaws don't define what a member is, or do they? I think you're muted.
Yes, Cindy, you're muted.
There we go. I was having trouble unmuting. It says makes an annual contribution financial contribution to the organization.
Ah, okay. So donors are members. So you could consider every donor a member in a year. I mean, you might just say, rather than an annual, just make the year at the annual meeting. So anybody who donated since the last annual meeting is a member through this annual meeting. And then that makes the annual meeting an occasion to renew your support. That might be another way to do it.
Good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So are there other burning questions that folks want to raise about membership?
If I could, please, I am Denise. I'm with the Alliance for Morris County Parks. And we are not a membership organization. However, I have a couple of board members who think that we need to be a membership organization in order to solicit more individual donors, and almost to be a friends of the parks. And in our case here at the Park Commission, there are actually several friends groups who focus on a particular facility or
Yeah.
park. So my concern has always been, if you're a friend of the Frelinghuysen Arboretum, for example, you get a whole bunch of benefits. Before COVID, you would go on a bus trip. You would have a tea that was just for members. You would have all of these benefits. As the Morris Park Alliance, I don't have those kinds of resources that I can give you a benefit. So although many member organizations may not get a benefit, you might not get a benefit as a member, the sense around the Morris County Park Commission is that a friend gets a benefit in some way. And I don't. So I've actually said, maybe we want to do supporters as opposed to members. Don't use that term. And
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, my challenge here is, it's the money end. They say we need to get more individual donors, so we need to do a Friends of the Parks. It's almost to me like, what comes first? Do I look for individual donors who I then term as supporters? Or do I go out and look for supporters who I can turn into donors?
Well, this sounds like a fundraising motive.
I
Primarily.
think it is, yes.
Okay, so they're making two assumptions, that we need more individual donors and we need members, those donors to be members.
Right.
I would question both. It may be true, but they may not be. You can often get more money from a few large donations than you'll get from a lot of little donations.
Thank you. If I can just jump in real quick, as a one-person organization, I agree 100%.
Yeah, all right.
If my time is spent on a $5,000 grant over a couple of days, to me, that's better than going out and looking for $10 donations.
Yeah, absolutely. The other part of their concern may be diversification of your revenue, and then it may be a certain amount of organizational pride that they want to, see and have a large number of people. But where you're in an environment where there are a whole group of associated nonprofits, the friends of groups, and you're kind of the glue, I guess, that pulls them together. And
they don't necessarily work under us per se. They were here before us,
yeah,
so we try not to step on toes.
yeah.
One of the smaller organizations actually may be coming into us as a committee, but they're kind of operating on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like they're jumping to membership. If I were talking to you, my first question would be, what's your budget and what do you want it to be? And what is it that you're going to buy with the extra dollars, if that's what's involved? And then what have you been doing to raise money, not necessarily memberships?
Mhm.
So, that doesn't go to the question of membership, but that's how I would approach fundraising strategy. And then ultimately, if we were going to come up with a plan for you, it would be the one that gets you the most return, the least amount of work and investment. So likely major gifts is often, or grants, can be very successful for small groups who are very good at it. And membership, a mass membership that centers around gifts of 100 or less, is a lot of work. It's hard to raise $10,000 or $100,000 with that size gift. So, yeah. And I think, I'm sure most of you know or are at least engaged in this process, but you need to have a donor management software. You need a database to keep track of all of these people. You need someone to keep that fresh, because it's really worthless if you don't have notes. If you talk to somebody today and they're interested but not ready to commit to a new fountain, you got to put that down and remind yourself 2 months from now to go back to them and update them on the status of that project and whether they're in a position to give. So that's work. Keeping that and then using it for appeals, to generate appeals and renewals and newsletters and just social media and so forth. That's all a lot of work. So it's great to do. It's important work. Most organizations should have a great communications program, but honestly, most, particularly tiny ones, don't have great communications. They have okay communications because they don't have enough people there to do it. Other questions about membership or experiences? Yeah.
Let's hear from Beth Gibbons at ASAP so we can see her unique style of membership they have at their organization.
Cool.
And then we can jump back to some more Q&A. Maybe there'll be some other things that spur your mind as you listen to Beth's presentation on her unique setup of membership.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it. And I appreciate just getting to be here to listen to this. I have some slides I'm going to share and I'm going to speak to them somewhat, but some of these are here kind of as visual cues, and I'm going to keep my remarks to 15 minutes. But as I'm talking, if you have questions about anything, feel free to break in and ask them. There's really no interrupting. There's just helping me to be more clear for all of you. So feel free to jump in at any point. I think I've got screen share power. I'm just going to put this presentation I have into presenter mode. And so you should be able to see my screen. Is it coming through?
Great.
So I'm the executive director at the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, and our work is around connecting and supporting people who are working on climate change adaptation or climate change resilience throughout North America. And so when we're thinking about climate change adaptation or climate change resilience, we approach this from saying that climate change is often thought of as having a variety of actions that can be taken about it. There are actions which can be around climate change mitigation, which is reducing risk. So it's reducing carbon, it's energy efficiency, it's a lot of how do we curb climate change. And then there's climate change adaptation, which is recognizing changes that are already built into our system that are occurring, and that we know that even with the greatest amount of mitigation success, we're still going to experience climate impact. So how do we prepare for those? And our network supports and connects the people who are working on those activities. And so our network provides a platform for adaptation professionals to engage and ultimately to build the field of adaptation. And then this is just one of our sort of member impact quotes. Our network is spread across the US and also Canada and throughout the Caribbean. So we're North American, and our members come from all different sectors. So we have a really diverse and inclusive network model, which includes private sector, academia, nonprofits, and government. And when people come here, we're really asking them to agree to our approach, which is saying that at ASAP, we believe that climate change is a real and a serious threat, and that we believe that adaptation and resilience will build stronger communities. And when we're defining if you're a climate adaptation professional, so should consider joining our network, we ask, do you use climate information in your decision-making processes? And if the answer is yes to that, then really from there, it's just a question of whether or not you are going to buy into the other values that we're putting out around how we organize our network and what it means to be a member here. And so I'll talk about what that means when we put it into practice and as we try to attract people into the network. We have both individuals and organizations. So we have about 700 individual members and 30 organizational members. And our organizations range from small organizations that have, 3 to 5 staff to large corporations that have 30,000 staff globally. So we serve a really broad diversity of entities and individuals. And I don't know if I had another slide that I just lost. Oh no. Okay, so like I appreciated what John was saying some, because when we are approaching our work, we approach it with like 2 core principles. And the first is that our purpose is field building. And when we're doing field building, we're saying that climate change adaptation, we believe it to be a field of practice unto itself. And that by connecting people who are doing this work, we're going to be able to actually accelerate the field by creating a network of leaders, by collecting and distributing strategies and actions, by keeping people in the field, and by creating cohesion and shared purpose. And for us, like that is our system of change that we're trying to advance of field building. And other examples that groups might adopt would be if like you're working on a market transformation or you're working on movement building. And we see those as aligned goals. And there's entities out there that are close to our organization, but those aren't what we focus on here. We're really working on like codifying this field as quickly as we can without actually doing it too fast, which has a bunch of issues. So each year, in order for us to evaluate how we're doing, we put out a member survey and we ask members, how do they think we're doing on these? And we ask this question of, because of ASAP, do you strongly agree, somewhat agree, disagree? And they respond to, are we creating a network of leaders? Do you have access to strategies and actions? Are you more likely to stay in the field? And is there a greater sense of cohesion and shared purpose? And I'm probably willing to share this because like we're doing really well right now, which is great. So we're seeing that members, as we're kind of like building this greater response to people who are saying they either agree or strongly agree to our delivery on that value. When people come into the ASAP network, because we are a member organization, but the second pillar is, so we field build, and then we function as a network. And as a network, we believe in 5 core principles. We believe in reciprocity, open access, being member driven, trust, and that there's something for everyone, not everything for everyone. And so we don't use a traditional membership model, or especially like a professional association model, which tends to be very transactional and gatekeeping, wherein somebody would come, receive a training, we would say, now you're trained, they go out in the world, they come back next year, they get trained again, and then they get kind of released back into the wild. And our relationship is to just transact, to be their kind of backstop to confirm their expertise. Instead, we really use the social impact network where when people come in, we say, we expect you to come in here with trust and reciprocity first, which means that we're actually going to accelerate what everybody knows by sharing what has failed and what has worked. And then as you take those lessons, being connected with one another to replicate those lessons across the network. And over time, we've evolved our work into also really leaning into the idea of open access, of freely sharing information and knowledge. And so I'll talk about our member structure too, because members pay dues, but everything that members create is now put in front of a paywall. So ASAP used to have used to hit ASAP's paywall really early in your experience of the network. But now everything that members generate is put out open and freely online. And so members are developing resources, but they don't have exclusive access to the things that are being member generated. So the value that we're counting on is really that they want to be at the center of the creation of the product in the conversation, but also lean into the idea that like what we're doing is so critical that everybody needs to have access to it. And then we're able to do a lot of work because we are member driven, and our staff support member activities, but the members have to be able to demonstrate that they can support and bring others together around what the activities they want to do. And we do that through a voting process that happens on an annual basis, where members identify a topic they want to convene around. They have to find up to 5 friends who want to convene with them. And then those topics are put up for a vote. And depending on our staff capacity, based on other obligations that we have, maybe through grants or what our budget is, we decide how many member groups we can sustain. And if a member group can bring in funding, which it costs $6,000 for the year for us to run a member group, if they can bring in funding to pay for staff time, we'll run their group. Otherwise, it has to come out of our general budget. So this year, it's probably going to be about 7 groups. On average, in a month, we host between 5 and 8 member conversations. So member group meetings, which can be 15 to 50 people, plus leadership team meetings for all of those groups. So it's a pretty heavy lift. When we talk about when we convene members, the value that we offer is being in this network idea, and that the network functions have 3 categories. We think of member groups coming together with the purpose of connectivity, alignment, and production. And so some members come together so they can really kind of do this like a show and tell relationship. This is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing. They're sharing information and they're creating new resource channels. Then you have groups that want alignment. And this is where we're thinking kind of toward that field building activity of this is what I'm doing and it's working. Oh, let me tweak what I'm doing so that it can work that way too. And they start to agree on some standards and terms. And then we get into production. And in production is where members usually have built on these others, although this is not a hierarchy. All of these activities have unique value. But in production, members are able to have come together, they've shared, they're aligned, and then they create products. So like we're now able to release things like responses to federal RFIs for information or state RFIs, and the members will generate those, and then staff will basically help guide that process and do some vetting and review or bring in experts where they're needed to support members. So our individual member structures are that we have a professional membership, a student membership, and a pay what you can membership. We introduced the pay what you can membership at the very beginning of 2020. We launched it in January, and then we're able to be very proud of ourselves for having it available when members really needed it as the pandemic hit. We say that, a pay what you can means that you can pay from $0 to $1 million. Incidentally, most people pay a lot less than $1 million. Our average dues right now from a pay what you can is just under $20. And this has been an interesting impact on our budget because it has impacted our budget to have this as an option. And originally we actually had a floor to it of $15. And then the average was $40. But when we took the floor away, more people started using the pay nothing option. So it's an interesting thing that we're learning from right now of how this works. And we'll go into some of our ideas around fundraising too, about using that gap, that budget gap, as actually a donation driver and getting people to think about a reciprocity activity in the network of making up the difference so the network can still run, even though some people don't have resources to pay in. Then our organizational member benefits, we do custom build packages. I said this starts at $1,500. I just did one today that was $1,000. We actually have one organization that's and it costs them $150. They wanted to be in as an organization, but it's one woman running a small environmental justice group in East LA. And so we're really flexible, and we have organizations that come in, so from $150 up to $10,000. Everything is hands-on and custom built so that they know what we're doing. And then we do orientations when the organizations come in so that they can really join in and go deep in the network and feel like they're also being asked to participate in those same principles of reciprocity, trust, and leadership, not just being sponsors. And then the last thing briefly here is this year we launched our, a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fund. Our JEDI Fund is a fund transfer program. So for low-income people or climate adaptation professionals from racially diverse and underrepresented groups, primarily Black, Latina, Latinos, they have an opportunity to request dollars from ASAP for work that they have done in the adaptation field. So like if they've been on a panel, if they've written articles, if they've led member groups in the past, then we'll give them compensation for it. And members donate to this, and then other members and non-members can email us and ask for dollars, and we'll distribute it to them. And so it is, again, like kind of looking at this reciprocity opportunity for members to transfer dollars, transfer wealth, basically within the network and outside of the network to the broader field to increase inclusion and diversity. So I think that's what I wanted to share. I have other slides that can talk about just like what ASAP does in terms of our member meetings and especially like our Connects program, which is where they come together for these member-led interest groups. But I think that's a good place to start. Lauren, is there anything that you hoped I would talk about that I skipped in that?
That was a great recap, Beth.
Cool. And then we started trying to get donations this year, which is a whole other like thing. It's been interesting for us to go from a membership organization to one that's working actually on creating a fundraising program, and like who is a donor and who is not, and how do we take a relationship-based approach to membership and apply it to fundraising. And so I've been learning trying to learn a lot about fundraising, even though I'm not a fundraiser. I'm just a nonprofit director, which means I was really good at climate adaptation. So someone eventually gave me an organization to run. Just a story of most nonprofits I've been part of.
I just want to offer how impressed I am that you start with a theory of change and very clear values and incorporate everything into it. And it sounds like you built the organization from the bottom with all of this in mind, or most of it.
Yeah, we did. ASAP was actually, it was incubated in a larger institute for about 5 years, and it was spun off and became independent. I spun it out of that institute in December of 2017. So we've been around for coming up on 4 years in December. And we were really lucky to have some initial funding from a foundation that allowed us to work with a strategic planning consultant. I mean, it was like kind of standard foundation dollars. They said, you should do a strategic plan. You have to work with this person. And so we're like, oh, we'll give our money to them. But it worked out really well. And they helped us to understand what was the way we wanted to operate as a network and with that theory of change. And we've really hung our work on it and tried to stay true to it.
I think it's amazing, really.
Thanks. We're proud of it.
John, are there other examples, or even using Beth's example of memberships that really drive or centered around mission?
Well, I guess it strikes me that in the case of ASAP, you have members who are already, actors in the field of climate adaptation. So they have a very particular interest in the networking opportunities and the resource sharing opportunities, and then the co-creation opportunities, which I think is very cool. It's just, I'm intrigued. I'm trying to think of how would we take something like that and apply it to an organization like ours. Clearly a good portion of our members have also been or are currently volunteers, but then not all volunteers actually, do donate to the organization. And we've kind of thought about, hey, how does that happen? How do we make sure that all volunteers are also being asked for a donation? So I'm just trying to think of like what, again, because we don't really offer member benefits. The benefit is you're helping to keep the Musknetcong River clean and, the habitat in the watershed healthy. And so I just trying to think about how to I don't know, package the benefit, the real benefit. So not some silly benefit like you get our newsletter. Everybody gets our newsletter. We want everybody to get our newsletter, but really trying to engage people perhaps more actively in seeing themselves as agents. Obviously, volunteerism is one way, but I don't know, that spurred me to think about other ways to make the member feel that they're benefiting in some way from being part of our group. So thought-provoking for sure, and a great organization. Go for it. I mean, I hope we need lots of that.
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of people, there's a lot of people that don't know about climate change adaptation at all. And then there's a lot of people who are doing climate adaptation and are like, I don't need another group to be part of, right? I'm already an engineer. I'm already doing stream restoration. I'm already these other things. And this has changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but we spent a lot of time actually developing a campaign that is called I Am an Adaptation Professional. And we had members basically tell their personal story of when did I realize I wasn't able to do my job the same way that I used to, and I had to change it because climate was changing my job for me. And I wonder, like, that same experience is like, I'm a river keeper, and I know river keepers is kind of a used, like maybe they have it patented, but like that same story of like, I often wish, Cindy, that like ASAP was place-based and we could say like, this river is healthier because of our work. You know, we sort of have this like, really like our mission is sort of amorphous out there. Like, and so like, I think that helping people to see themselves as the carriers of your mission, I guess that's it to me, is like, that story is similar. I feel your pain and the challenge of it.
I think the urgency, you know, has just been hammered home. Everything the environmental movement does, it really needs to be intensified, I think. And people are ready for it. People don't know what to do about the state of the planet. And you do. You can offer some things. So I think engaging people in the way, you know, Lauren, you kind of people had other professions and you got them to redefine themselves in part as adaptation professionals. Is that right?
Yeah. And actually we're very inclusive. It's like, we expect you're going to be part of the bar, like, and that's also part of, and built into our message about this work is that like, we all need to be multidisciplinary. Like, we all are being called on to do multiple jobs. And so this is a way for you to make that new piece of your work easier. Like, we're here to make your work easier.
I also think it's amazing that you're drawing content from your members, that they're creating the intellectual property that you conserve or share. And that's another model that a local organization can adapt. You know, stories about the river, stories about a kayak trip on the river, or wildlife on the river, or memories, or whatever. Building an intellectual content base, story base around your resource is something that members could certainly contribute to.
Yeah, we actually changed our mission in 2018, that it was previously connecting and supporting climate adaptation professionals while advancing innovation in the field. And in order to really reflect that our work is only what members bring to it, we changed the words to connecting and supporting adaptation professionals to advance innovation in the field. And we take that to heart, because there's some stuff that we'd like to do, I'd like to do as a staff person, but if we don't have a member who is the force behind it, we've really, we're not pure about it, but like, it has to be really it has to be really strongly considered whether or not we'll do it if it's not being member driven.
That's courageous. I mean, if you think you know what the mission is and you're gonna take your hands off the wheel now and then. And let them drive. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's hard. It can be hard.
How do you recruit your members, Lauren?
So this is like, our members, 60% of members join because someone else asked them to join.
Ah,
It's word of mouth.
peer-to-peer.
Yep. We're actually thinking about changing that because, so, you know, behind this, like ASAP has had significant general fund support from a foundation for the last 5 years. And we realize that's not going to go on forever. And we also have realized in a strategic planning process this year that general fund support, while it's been critical to our existence and success, it's actually undermined our recruitment and like our other drive to diversify revenue. And so our fiscal year starts in October, and we're structuring our fiscal year to have a focus on recruitment of individual and organizational members and on delivery of fee-based services, because there's actually a lot that we can now deliver external to the network. And so this is going to be a new set of work for us in this coming year of what does recruitment look like when we're not being passive peer-to-peer, but rather having ASAP organization, like staff-driven recruitment as a part of our programming.
That's a big change.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't really have anybody on staff who knows how to do it. So that's like, so I'm learning that now.
Yeah, you need
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
That's really great. I mean, what else do people see that they would want to steal from
Well,
that?
Beth, hi, it's Wade Kirby with the Great Swamp Watershed Association. And I'm just curious to ask you, because your presentation was so clear about membership engagement and your expectations. I mean, that was crystal clear. Do you have an orientation when these folks are recruited and they come on board, they fully are aware of how you expect them to be involved? And if they're willing to make that commitment, and if not, they just say, this is too busy for me? Or how does that work exactly? Because, you know, you really have it all together. It's great.
Yeah, we were realizing the network was starting to grow, and we weren't sure that we were actually really bringing people into those values as much as we felt like they were part of what we had built on as a staff and board. And so while everyone doesn't necessarily get oriented to those, our member-led interest group leaders do. And so now we have an annual orientation process where our member-led interest groups, and so right now there's 5, 8, 3. So we have 10 either member-led interest groups or committees. Some groups are standing because they have a purpose that we don't think should be put up to a vote, like education, justice, and the board of directors. Annually, they are oriented to network theory, basically, and our network theory. I'd be happy to share that whole slide deck too, if anybody wanted it, but it includes like the alignment production, knowledge sharing idea, and then what, like how to lead and the roles that we recommend for member groups to adopt. Like, we don't force member groups to adopt any leadership format, but we have seen some things that work and don't work. So we distribute that. But yeah, we give it a lot. We give this presentation in that particular image quite a lot to reinforce it.
Right. And you showed us the different tiers of financial commitment. So did they also come with different levels of engagement or no? So when a member joins ASAP, they're in for the long haul, and they realize what their commitment is, and then their financial commitment is what they can afford. Yep.
Yeah, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound.
Right.
And you know, we don't actually get a lot of pushback about it now, but I think before, when we tried to the network's doing really well. So I guess I say this not as like I say this with humility, but like our network is doing really well right now, and it hasn't always been. Like I've been here now for 6 years, and we used to talk a lot more about the individual like benefits. So like you'd get a newsletter, and you would get discounts to conferences, and you would get and like we tried to like really make it about what are you as an individual getting, and those things are still there. Conference discounts are still there, and the newsletter is still there. And in fact, like we now have publishing houses for our researchers that have like, special discounts to publish with them. Like really our focus when we talk about the value is like their relationship to one another. And so it also allows us to be really inclusive because it's not for everyone. And we don't certify. And so if you're looking for a certification, there are other organizations that do certification for climate change professionals, but we do not. And we're also okay with that. Like we can talk about why we do and don't. And with the flexibility, it says like, it may not be forever, but we don't today. And so if that's what you want, like we're not that for you.
Right. I would suspect your annual attrition rate is very low.
I wish I knew. Our CRM is horrible. So we had like no CRM until late 2019. We were using paid membership pros, a combination of paid membership pros with what was built in to a custom made super fragile WordPress site and Braintree payment gateway. And eventually the payment gateway stopped communicating to paid membership pros. So like we basically never knew our history, and then we transferred all of our information into Neon, which works okay. But like the data, it's like the data story. Like we basically brought in bad data, and now it's very hard for us to know the history of our membership. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have numbers, but like really under the hood, like they're our best guess. And we have a lot of people think that they're members, but they haven't paid dues in like 3 years. Mm-hmm. And those are uncomfortable conversations to have with people. Which that's like definitely ED stuff that I get sent out for. Beth, go tell so-and-so that they're not really a member. So that's why their story didn't get published, in the blog. And you're like, actually, you haven't paid. And they're like, anyway, we have a neat culture. A lot of people think that they were like the founders of ASAP, which is nice. But they probably weren't, and they also probably don't pay their dues. I do a lot of those conversations.
I thought you had gone to where they could pay zero.
Yeah, you can, but you also have to actually have your membership be active. Like you have to have interacted with it in some way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And are the dues rolling, or are they on an annual basis?
They're. What do you?
Well, I mean, like if somebody joins in June and somebody else joins in September, you do it per member, or is it?
Yeah, it's per member.
Okay.
And a lot of them are auto renewed. And so, I'm not really happy. I'm not really that happy with Neon, to be honest. It's not like what I came here to say. But so members right now, like members can't log into their profile and add new credit card information. So if a member's credit card expires, they need to call somebody at ASAP. We only have 4 people that work here, and one of them is part-time. And so they have to call, and someone from ASAP has to take their credit card information over the phone to update their account. So it's really, really a high barrier. And so losing people is really easy. And you do have to be like, you have to be under this active membership title. Like we haven't fully reconciled having a pay what you can down to 0 with just like anybody being able to get specifically our internal newsletters. And our internal newsletters are where we distribute all of the login information for all of our member meetings. So you have to have a paying membership account, even if it's 0, in order to get into those meetings. The products of the meetings then are all public, but the meetings themselves are member only.
Is there, like when they renew, even if it's 0, they have to go to your website and say, I affirm your principles and I want to be a member again or continue my membership?
They don't have to reaffirm their membership, but they do get a notification. And like I said, most of them are auto-renewed. So if they're
Yeah.
not auto-renewed, then they have to sign back in. And then the system would treat it like a new membership, which is really, so like, it's really, I don't know. Neon does some things really well, and it has a lot of aspirations for very high functionality, but for us, we really struggle to get the most.
Well,
Like,
members, that kind of a membership, you know, you're halfway between the professional association software and the donor software, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also backstops our whole website now. So we kind of went to like this one-stop shop, and that's what we got, right? It's like it does a little bit of everything, like 75% well, and you feel the 25% pretty acutely when you live and swim in it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question here about equity in membership. Beth, how have you included that in your?
So we made a decision a while ago that we were going to introduce the pay what you can membership. So we made that decision in 2019, and because we didn't want cost to be a barrier to being a member, and that was the output. Like that was one of the outcomes from a series of equity and justice trainings that staff went through. We felt like it was one of the easiest places for us to get at. And then we've introduced that Jedi Fund. We have a standing, so one of the standing committees that doesn't get put up for a vote is this Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee too. That has two functions. There's a community of practice where people talk about how they're working on justice and equity in their work. And then there's an accountability group. So we have a Jedi statement and now have a series of Jedi commitments that relate to both how the organization should function and how members should function. And there's an accountability group that meets and assesses us on metrics of how well we're doing to actually achieve what we've talked about to be an inclusive space and a space of belonging for all adaptation professionals, and also like expect and push justice and equity to be centered in people's work.
Are there any last questions, as we have about a minute left for Beth or John?
Both very helpful. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Thanks so much for letting me join you and talk about this. I'm happy to answer other questions if people have. And I will send to Lauren that intro deck that I talked about that goes through our network function so that folks can have it. It has also the guidance that we provide to our member-led interest groups of just like ways to structure member groups and member leadership that we've seen be successful.
Thanks also for the time that I had, and really enjoyed talking to you. And again, you can, ask me any questions as well.
Thank you so much. I realize we have very little time left. We did want to see if we wanted to vote on how we were going to utilize the funds that were raised in honor of our fund blank. I've totally gone blank. One of the groups was, sorry, Simone, sorry, in honor of Simone. We wanted to use it either towards an organization, towards a professional development. And so we have a group, the Lower Raritan Watershed Partnership. They are an organization, small grassroots organization. They are trying to help with stormwater issues in the Lower Raritan. And they have had some difficulties. They're all volunteer based. They work in a lot of municipalities. And so they were looking to see if they could be a recipient of this funding. It's about $300 that we have. Wanted to get everybody's opinion on that. That would be okay. All right, so we will go forward with providing them with the funding in honor of Simone. And we will
Yes.
see you next.
Thank you.
Excellent. We'll see you next month, everybody. We'll have
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate it. All right, take care.